Honestly, I was planning on just reciting the preamble to the Constitution for this video, so I didn't plan anything else. But then I realized that that recitation takes seconds. So I might ramble a little bit in this video because I don't know what I'm saying. The Constitution of the United States is actually the second constitution that we tried forming, a constitution as previously defined in my videos being the governing document which describes how the country is supposed to be put together. And the first one was the Articles of Confederation. It was discovered that in that instance, while trying to balance anarchy and tyranny, that they'd swung a little too far to the anarchy side of things, and the government wasn't strong enough to run properly. So when they formed the Constitution, which we now have, they made it a little bit stronger, but still not too strong. They're trying to hit that balance because they don't want to swing back into tyranny, they don't want to swing back into anarchy. Nowadays, we see the political spectrum as being right and left. Back then, it was more anarchy versus tyranny kinds of thing, which I think I've mentioned a lot in the past 5 seconds. Anyway, so the Constitution of the United States is actually, as far as I'm aware, the longest standing constitution in the world. So back in the Declaration of Independence, when it says that government's long established to not be changed for light and transient causes, maybe the U.S. government, the Constitution, maybe counts just a little bit. It's been, what, it's almost 250 years? Not quite, almost. I'm bad with numbers, guys. I'm sorry. Of the Constitution, I have a handy little pamphlet. I actually collect these things. It's fun and weird. There's some quotes in this one, and it says, George Washington said that the power under the Constitution will always be in the people. It is entrusted for certain defined purposes and for a certain limited period to representatives of their own choosing. And whenever it is executed contrary to their interests or not agreeable to their wishes, their servants can and undoubtedly will be recalled. Because part of what made the United States different was that it is a republic, right? It's a democratic republic. We elect people, we elect representatives. And then if they're not representing us properly, we can unelect them again and elect other people in when the times come for re-elections. And the hope for this, from what I've been able to gather, I'm not an expert, but I have tried to study the Constitution and the Articles of Confederation, what are they called? I know words. Papers. Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers a little bit. They were worried about how power corrupts people, and if you hold on to power too long, since we are fallible people, it tends to go to our heads. So they wanted to keep that from happening by trading people out regularly. They also wanted to make the government move, the federal government at least, move slowly because it's far enough removed from the people that it's kind of hard to care about that many people, and we can try, but they didn't want it to move so quickly that we could all have our lives ruined because a couple of idiots in DC decided that they wanted to do something. That got a little messed up over time. I'm not going to go into who I blame for that, but there are certain people in history that I don't like for this reason. Thomas Jefferson said, "On every question of construction, let us carry ourselves back to the time when the Constitution was adopted. Recollect the spirit manifested in the debates, and instead of trying what meaning may be squeezed out of the text or invented against it, conform to the probable one in which it was passed." I really wish people would do this more. I look around and I don't think it's really happening. There's a line, I forget where exactly in here, about how the government can do certain things. It's while it's restricting the powers of government, right? But in there it mentions that they call it the elastic clause. I forget the exact line, but it's something about how as far as it is necessary for the good of the people and everything. And a lot of people like to interpret that as, well, as long as it's for the good of the people, then we can do whatever we want. But if that's what the framers meant, I struggle to understand why they bothered to restrict the powers in the first place. And I see it more as they can do these things, but only as far as it is necessary for the good of the people. I see it more as a further restriction on the powers and not an expansion. So I see the elastic as already stretched out and pulling back instead of stretching out further. That's my take. What do I know? I'm just a Gen Z kid. I've only been studying this for I don't know how long. Yeah. So that's me yelling at a bunch of specialists and experts. Not an expert, just a citizen who thinks too much. Just ask my friends. They're probably all mad at me. Time for a quote from Federalist number 45, which was by Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison. Let's see. It says, the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. Because, again, the federal government wasn't supposed to be the main government of the U.S., right? It was the overseeing body and everything, but the states being states, free and independent states, as it says in the Declaration of Independence, were initially meant to be more like smaller countries unified in one federation. And it was a little too separate under the Articles of Confederation, which is why we switched over to a federation, made the federal government a bit stronger. But a lot of that has been lost over time. And now we give Texans a hard time for having all that state pride and everything. But honestly, personally, I think it would be better if more states were like that and more people felt that unity of statehood, if I'm phrasing that well. Again, this would probably go better if I'd written it out beforehand. We saw the states as being responsible for their state and only reaching out and worrying about the federal government when it's something that actually does influence the whole country. Or it's something that the state really can't handle on its own and shouldn't be expected to. I think things would go better, but yeah, I'm just another Gen Z kid arguing about the government and society and everything is terrible. Stop the presses! There's nothing to report. Let's see, my last quote that I have here, same booklet, it's from George Washington to in the Constitutional Convention to the delegates there. He said, "If to please people we offer what we ourselves disapprove, how can we afterwards defend our work? Let us raise a standard to which the wise and honest can repair. The event is in the hands of God." When putting together this document, it wasn't just a argument over transient ideas. Yes, the idea of sovereignty in the hands of the people and this sort of thing, it had been going around a little bit, right? There was Locke, I think, who'd been talking about it some, but no one had actually done it. It was all theoretical. And honestly, the idea of democracy wasn't popular at the time. Democracy was that thing that Athens did in Greece and it always fell apart. Democracy wasn't a good idea then. Everyone knew that democracy falls apart. It's a terrible idea. But we did it. Because they weren't just arguing about this is what we think is a good idea at the time. It wasn't just slight and transient causes. It was principles. And I'm not going to mention who. There was a president in our history who argued that the best way to understand the Declaration of Independence is to ignore the preamble. And as far as I have been able to tell from my research, he meant to simply skip ahead to the 27 injuries, which in so doing, you miss a lot of the principles that they mentioned. They weren't leaving because, oh, King George did X, Y, and Z things that we didn't like. They left because these are the principles of government. This is what the government is supposed to do. He is failing to do this. The 27 injuries were examples of things that he had done to fail as a good government. And then by listing out what they thought a government was supposed to do, they gave themselves a blueprint that they then had to conform to. The blueprint to the Constitution is in the Declaration of Independence. And so by doing that, when forming a new government, they then had to find a way to fulfill all of those things that they said that the government had to do. And that's what they were trying to do. And they prayed. They prayed. And I don't know how much they prayed individually, but I have heard of at least one time when they were arguing and everything was going to fall apart because you have that many people. If you have 5 people in one room, you're going to have 7 opinions, right? And they had that many people and they all cared about what they were doing. They all convinced they were right. They were trying to look out for their people and it was going to fall apart. It was going to fall apart. The Articles of Confederation were not working. They could not agree. There were the large states versus the small states and everything, the South versus the North, and everything was just, it was going to die. Everything they had fought for was going to fall apart. And then it didn't. They prayed. They stepped back and they asked God for help because there was no other way to make this work. There really wasn't. I don't know I don't remember when that was. Again, I didn't plan this out. Usually I have a rough script, which I mostly ignore, but I didn't do that this time. I don't know how long after it was that they prayed that they managed to form the Constitution properly, finally, and ratify it. But I do know that God has his hand in making it. I'm not going to argue that every line and every word is divinely inspired. I'm not going to say that the Constitution is, like the Bible, we should take it as scripture. But I do believe that God was behind it. And yeah, that's part of why I love it. It's part of why I love this country. It's not just that I was born here. I was born here. I've been raised here. And I love it. I love our nation. I love this country. I love this people. I obviously don't know them all. It would be impossible to know everybody who lives here. There are more people here than I care to count. But I believe that the principles behind this country, the ideals, the essence of this nation are good. I believe that the people here are basically good. We're trying. We disagree. We have conflicts of opinion. Sometimes we don't all agree on this country, even. We don't all agree on which direction it should go anymore, let alone how to get there. But I still believe in us. That probably sounds silly, but we have a constitution that I firmly believe was divinely inspired. Because there's no other way that you get that many people, that many humans, that many people with their own mistakes and triumphs and histories and agendas and ideas, and you get them all to agree on something. You get them all to agree on something this important that has lasted this long and has changed so much in history. That just doesn't happen. And you could argue that it's just an outlier. It was just luck. I don't believe in luck. I don't know all of the reasons why God would care so much about this country and this people and this land. I like to think that I know some of them, but I'm not going to pretend that I know the mind of God, because I'm just a person. Even the little bit that I do understand, I'm probably misunderstanding to some degree. I know I'm misunderstanding some things because it just doesn't make sense. This document has changed the world. Up to the revolution, innovation was distant, right? There was the printing press, right? There was some innovation, but by and large, things were still mostly the same, right? Ships had sails and oars. And some of the details would change. You can make ships bigger or smaller. How do you plow a field, right? If you took an ancient Egyptian, plopped in the early 1700s, you might have some language barriers, but you'd understand what was going on more or less, yeah? Now, just nearly 250 years later, as far as history is concerned, it is not long. It has not been long at all. But the world is so different because people have had the freedom to innovate and change, to try and fail and rise and fall. And yeah, it sucks to fall. It does. And I can't say that I blame people for wanting there to be some kind of safety net, but if we're busy trying to make sure that nobody can fall, then nobody can rise either. If we're trying to make sure that everyone's so wrapped up in bubble wrap that they'll never get hurt, they will never be able to move. Under the Constitution, as designed and intended, even if it was imperfect, and I'm not going to say that it ever was perfect, they formed it intentionally with the capacity to be changed because they understood that it would need amending at some point. They gave us the freedom to try. And that was something that people hadn't had. Not really. That's why it's been the land of opportunity, because you can come from nothing and become anything. And it takes work. I get that. It takes work to get up every morning and go out and do something. It takes work to decide what you want to be. And it takes work to try something and realize it's not working. You have to decide to cut your own losses because no one's going to tell you to do it for you. I mean, your parents and friends, like, people might give you advice, but you have to make those own choices. And with those choices that we have comes responsibility. And I think somehow a lot of people have forgotten that. Again, written into our founding documents back in the Declaration, they understood that in order to throw off your previous government, you had to take responsibility to then form new government. They understood that in rejecting Britain, they then had to make something better, or what was the point? And that's something that was missing in most revolutions. Most revolutions throughout history have been terrible bloodbaths, just massacres, awful things. But this one was different. And again, I believe that God was in it. I believe that there were miracles upon miracles throughout the entire thing. And I believe that this is another miracle that we have been given. With that and the definitions from our lovely 1828 dictionary, it's the Declaration of Independence, the preamble, because I don't have time to read the entire thing to you guys right now. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. My native